Build Your Business listeners. This is Matt Reynolds, your host for the podcast, and you are listening to what we are calling the legacy episodes. And really, these are the pre-episodes that really led to this podcast, the Build Your Business podcast. This is really my life's work and my brother's life's work in building your business. And so they were originally published in the Barbell Logic podcast as part of the Principles or Coaching Success series, but really touch on similar topics to the Build Your Business podcast: how to improve your productivity, how to set and accomplish your goals, deprioritize urgent tasks, to focus on what is most important to you, and most importantly, to become a better person and leader and business owner overall. I'm proud to bring you these podcasts. Again, many years of life's work, several years of podcasts, and several decades of business ownership. Hope you enjoy them and learn from them. You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship. Welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast, and happy Father's Day to you all the guys that are listening to us, and everybody else that's listening to us. You guys have dads too. And so happy Father's Day to all. Happy Father's Day to you, Chris.
Happy Father's Day to you, Matt.
Thank you. So we thought it'd be fun for Father's Day just to take a little stroll down memory lane, and we're going to talk mostly about our memories of our lives growing up, and then also what it was like in our early years of lifting. We haven't talked about that a lot, and also our perception of the other during those times will be fun to talk about. But first off, I want to say Happy Father's Day to Dad. I made a very emotional post on my Instagram a year ago. I don't really post on Instagram anymore about Dad, and said that would be my last Father's Day with Dad, and it still might be because we're recording this a little bit ahead, but I saw Dad for the first time yesterday in about 5 months. They let me finally go in and see him in the kind of early post-COVID. And, it was tough. So he's not in good shape. He's in hospice, and the guy's dying. And, but man, he was a great dad, and I'm thankful for him. He loved our mom and loved us tremendously and treated us well, and taught us a lot of good lessons. And also there were a lot of lessons I wish he had taught us that he didn't. But I learned lessons there. I actually think that's a good thing, because I've learned things that I've said to myself, these are lessons that are important for me to teach my kids because my dad didn't teach me that. And I don't hold any animosity there against him at all. Man, he did the best he could. And again, I think the most important thing is that you love your kids well, and he loved us well. So happy Father's Day to Dad, who will definitely not listen to this, but Mom probably will. So Happy Father's Day to Mom as well. And it's I'm ready for Pops to not have to suffer anymore. That's for sure.
It was such a fascinating thing. I learned so much from Dad, especially in the last several years that I was in Springfield, and we were able to take these fishing trips together and stuff. It was just definitely in early life. I mean, like, nobody knows what they're doing as a dad, and he didn't either. But his ability to reflect on it later was fantastic, and
very cathartic.
Oh,
right?
Extremely so. I mean, he could say even himself, like, "Whew, I didn't do well on that," And some of the things we would just tell as a story that was kind of funny from our childhood, and Dad would be like, "Ooh, I didn't do that well," But you learn a lot through that process, and he was so good at listening to something that he disagreed with agreeably. That was also something that's fascinating, because Dad and I saw the world from very different perspectives, but could talk to each other and be good friends at the end of it, which was not everybody has that relationship with a parent, and so I appreciate that.
The three of us, especially on things like religion, we sat on three really different areas. Like it wasn't sort of a 2 against 1 sort of thing. It was actually probably more that Dad was kind of in the mid. Dad was like traditional evangelical orthodoxy. That's kind of what he was, right? And I'm not that, and you're not that, and you and I are on opposite. And we were able to have good conversations about it on those fishing trips. We always loved the fishing trips for the road trip more than the actual fishing.
Yeah.
And
very rarely would we actually step in the water. Matt and I got to the point in the last ones where we just let Dad wander off. We'd make sure that like he didn't float down the river, but then he and I would just sit there and just chat while we watched Dad, because Dad wanted to fish. Like Dad wanted to fish, but Matt and I just wanted to take a 3-hour road trip and then turn around and take it back home,
tell stories and talk to Dad. So
which is what this is going to be today.
Yeah, that's what we're gonna do. So we're gonna do a little stroll down memory lane. So we've said this before. We were raised incredibly poor, below the poverty line. I was born in Houston, Texas, but my first 4 years of life was in Springfield. But very early on, and when you were a tiny baby, we moved to Memphis, Tennessee, for Dad to go to seminary. And my perception of you as a little kid, very tough, very stubborn. We're probably going to grow up to not be very smart.
I've heard that. Yep.
In your adult life, you are very tough, very stubborn, less so than you were as a kid, for sure. And oddly enough, you turned out really bright. I don't know what happened. But, you were sort of like I remember you as sort of like a Cro-Magnon child. Like you were not, you were like, what was the little kid on the Flintstones?
Yeah, that kid, Bam Bam.
Bam Bam. You were Bam Bam. That was exactly who you were growing up. You were Bam Bam.
Yep.
What is your perception of what your young years, like what kind of person were you in those early days?
It's really hard to reflect on yourself, when you're young. Like, I actually think I remember more about feeling scared a lot, which I think is sort of, on the outside, it must have manifested itself as toughness because I felt like I needed to be. But, I think I'm probably a little more driven by the emotion of fear than I realized when I was young.
Yeah, that's interesting. What is your perception of me as a kid?
When we were young, of course, this is later in your life, earlier in mine. So I'm the little kid in this case. I mean, we had like this incredible, for the fact that we had no money. And like, I mean, as an adult now, I realize just how little money we had. Like, we had no money. Our childhood was really good. Like, we went out and played baseball basically every day. Yeah. We rode bikes together. We did all kinds of stuff. I mean, like, you were a really great big brother, with the exception of like 2 circumstances. And other than that, it was like really, really, really good. But like,
was one of those circumstances when I broke your finger in half when we were wrestling, and then made you go get me a glass of milk and made you promise to not tell Mom and Dad? Don't tell Mom and Dad I just broke your finger, and your finger was broken in half and turned sideways. And I was like, also, I'm kind of thirsty. Go give me some milk.
I can actually literally remember standing in the kitchen holding the gallon of milk with my index finger pointed straight up and just doing it with these extra fingers and going like, why is he making me do this?
I'm horrible. I think I was, my perception of myself specifically as an older brother was that I was a little power hungry and manipulative. And so
I'd say that's accurate. But I mean, like, simultaneously though, I mean, it wasn't a long period of time that you wielded it that way.
Sure.
So,
sure.
I mean,
the other time that I actually don't even want to tell on the podcast that I treated you poorly, even I have talked about it in counseling because of, and it was a stupid thing. It was a stupid thing where I embarrassed you publicly in a basketball gymnasium. I don't want to tell the details. I want to make sure, I want to make sure people don't think
I was even
it was anything
about
truly inappropriate. But it was a thing that I felt I harbored a lot of guilt about for years. And so, but no, I think you and I got along really, really well in general. We fought like brothers fight, and it was like boy fight and stuff.
Most of that was
sports.
fun.
Yeah, it was sports and football. Like, we get in fights because somebody would tackle somebody too hard in football. Like, we literally, basically, our whole life were bicycles, baseball, basketball, and football. Yeah. And not team sports, because we lived in towns where boys, you couldn't go beyond the. Well, you couldn't be in the public. It was the 80s, and there was crack, and we lived in a rough town, and Mom and Dad chose to protect us from that, and and it was probably the right call. Although a few years later, when we went to a public school for the first time, it was an eye opener. Yeah, you got to public school, and you're like, oh, we were truly the very sheltered homeschool 80s kids. Yeah, showing up to the first day of school with our lunch pail and our dark blue jeans with the super gold stitching.
Man,
and
that was so much
it was
worse
tough.
for you than it was for me. You were old enough that those patterns had been, created into something like popularity. For me, in the second grade, nobody knew or cared yet. So I kind of I strolled right into the second grade and immediately ruled the place. Fine. I ruled it. I mean, just didn't do fine. I led the thing. And
do you think a lot of that is because, like, one, you didn't have those social, you didn't have self-esteem issues from having sort of poor social interactions because you were so young, and then also, do you think some of it is, we've talked about this on the podcast in the past, that you played with me and all my friends, and we were all 3 years older than you, and
absolutely
beat the shit out of you, and you were like, man, if I can hang from being bullied by Matt and his friends and play sports with Matt and his friends, you can dominate the second grade.
I mean,
if you
without
could play
a doubt.
basketball with a bunch of fifth graders.
I never even considered, it never crossed my mind that those people were my peers. I was like, oh, no. I'm several levels above this, which I realize is a horribly arrogant thing to say, but all I had ever done is play with kids that were 2, 3, 4 years older than me.
Yes.
And so, if we were out on the playground playing a game of basketball, I was like, what are these fools doing? Like, this is miserable. I'm playing with a bunch of kindergartners. This is,
That's right.
So it was just, it had a big effect. I'm watching it with my own children. I mean, I've got the same setup, boy, girl, and similar distance. And my middle son is just fearless. And
yes.
It's because
terrifyingly so.
Yeah, terrifyingly fearless, and he is dominant in pretty much anything he wants to do. It's fascinating.
And your oldest son is very eloquent. He's a good speaker. He's very smart.
Yep.
He is
very risk averse.
Very risk averse.
Yeah.
Right. And I would say that was me growing up. Like, certainly when we were younger, if somebody had said, like, who's the one that's going to be the entrepreneur and the risky one, it would have been you. And who's the one that's gonna be an engineer and work at an engineering firm but not own the engineering firm? It's gonna be me. And like, my identity as a kid, I think, was wrapped up in, I was smart, and I was known that I was smart, and I was a pretty good athlete. I was a decent athlete, but I was a ginormous sissy. Like, I was very weak. And again, I think if I look back, certainly there's a part of me that would love to go back and, if you knew then what you know now. But I also think that I wouldn't have got into powerlifting. I wouldn't have started doing Strongman. I wouldn't have ended up opening Strong Gym or done online coaching, had Barbell Logic, had I not later in life looked back on those years with disdain and embarrassment for being a sissy.
Yeah.
And decided to be like, I can't be weak anymore. I have to be strong. And
well, so, I mean, that's what I did too. It just didn't look that way on the outside. I mean, the first weight set we got for my birthday, right? When I was 11. And it was in response to our cousin Phil had got a weight set himself. And we, at Christmas, saw each other, and Phil was jacked. We were like, what is going on?
Hit puberty early.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember going over, so we lived 2 or 3 hours apart, and I can very clearly, Phil was and is to this day, and if you ever listen to this, will be fine. Phil's a nerdy guy. Now, he's less nerdy today than he was then, right? Like, he is really, like, his social skills have blossomed, but he was a nerdy. That guy was super into computer programming when he was like 7. He was programming computers and playing Sega Genesis video games,
and
right?
the piano and every instrument else.
Oh yeah, and also was a musical savant. And so when we played sports or wrestled, we would often have our wrestling. I don't know if you remember this. Like, we would wrestle, and the way you win is you would wrestle until someone would pass out. You would put them in a chokehold until they went limp.
Yep. That's how it went.
like you do as little boys. And we weren't 15 doing this. We were 7 and 9 doing this. And of course, we just beat the hell out of Phil. And then one year we came down, early summer, I think is what it was. I think it was summer. And we came, and he had hit puberty and gone to a garage sale and bought a set of weights and started lifting. And like you do, have no idea what he's doing. I don't even think it was a barbell. I think it was dumbbells. He was doing curls and over, whatever. And he beat the shit out of us.
Yeah.
And we were like, what just happened?
Yep.
And he's like, got the weights. Now, looking back, also, you two are still little boys, and Phil hit puberty, which sucked because Phil was a year younger than me and 2 years older than you. And then the next guy to hit puberty was you. And then I was the last
I was an early bloomer. Third
Yeah, I
grade.
remember you were like, look, I got armpit hair. And you're like in the 5th grade, and you had a big bunch of armpit.
I think armpit hair was in the 4th grade. I actually remember showing a kid like, what is going on here? And he's like, you got armpit hair. And I was like, what?
Again, not a talk that we ever really had with Dad. Dad was not ever like, hey,
actually, I remember
changes.
telling Dad one time, like, Dad, I got abs. Check it out. And I was like, see this? I got a line that goes straight down. I got these abs. He was like, son, that embarrasses me. He goes, your body embarrasses me. And I was like, okay, this is not a safe conversation.
I can remember the first time I beat Dad at arm wrestling. I was probably 15 or so at the table. It was at the dinner table, and I beat Dad in arm wrestling. And I can remember the look of dejection on his face, and I can remember the feeling of dejection in my brain because you always want your dad to be able to beat you up,
and
or be able to stand up for you and protect you, and not literally beat you up, but could if he wanted to, right? And so, I can remember the day that I was like a realization that I was tougher than my father, and I at 15, I was still pretty weak. Like I hadn't gotten into weightlifting at all. That wasn't really my thing. I didn't discover that until later in high school. And so let me ask you this, and then we'll move on to kind of the early lifting days, more of the lifting days. My identity, I felt like in high school, and I've often used the term, I was painfully average, right? I was smart, and I was known for being smart toward the top of the class. I was a little bit lazy, so my teachers were frustrated with me because I was always the guy that would do really well on the finals and do really well on the standardized tests and like not have the greatest grades because I was just like not interested. And I was a pretty good / decent athlete, and so I could hold my own in sports, and I was pretty smart. But like outside of that, I was just sort of forgettable. And I wonder for you, you were always very tough and very good at sports, but like we mentioned, you had a reputation, at least among the family, being kind of dumb in the early years. And can you remember when the transition occurred where you felt, did you ever feel dumb? And 2, did you feel that there was a transition where you're like, holy shit, I'm actually smarter than everybody else now?
I never felt dumb. I did not care about school at all whenever in kindergarten and 1st grade. 2nd grade is when the blossom started to occur. We went to public school, and I was like, all these other kids are here, and I think I'm smarter than all of them. And so whenever we took the standardized test, I guess I did exceptionally well on that, and they put me in the gifted program after that. And once I realized what I was capable of, then that sort of turned it around. But I still didn't really think of myself as being. I knew I was one of the smartest kids in class in the 3rd grade, but I was much more focused on the athletic side of things. I mean, I remember, again, just on the playground, but it was at Cotter, they played basketball, like they played school basketball in elementary school. You wore your school Cotter jersey and played basketball.
Right. Sure.
And I played it in front of these kids we had like an assembly, and I played in front of the high school kids. And I mean, I stole the ball from every other kid on the court and just took it straight down and shot it and made it every single time. And they were like, "Oh my God, future high school, best." And now I'm thinking about it, it's like tiny little school in the middle of Arkansas. It was fun, but
you were a giant fish in the tiniest pond.
Exactly. Well, that gave me a head that was pretty big. And so I
remember you played baseball. Your first year playing baseball, you hit a home run. Every single at bat, except for 3, there were like 3 at bats that you didn't hit a home run. Like literally, non-Reynolds exaggeration. There were like 3 at bats the whole season where you didn't hit a home run. Like one was a double and like maybe 2 singles. I don't even know if you ever got out the entire time. It was bizarre. So that makes sense though, that as we transitioned into public school, that you were like, oh, this is I'm smart. Yeah, I think our perception of you not being as smart came from the fact that you were kind of like your middle son, and you were like, you would ram your head into things, like not on purpose, but you just like, you would go to the emergency room often, like you would run
so frequently.
60 miles an hour as fast as you could around corners and run smack into telephone poles and bust your lip wide open and have to go get stitches. And like, that was just kind of you.
Yep.
So we discovered you started lifting, or we started lifting about the same time. Of course, you were several years younger than me, and then you stayed really more active with it in high school. I really got into lifting my senior year of high school, and really I could tell I was good at it, even compared to most of the other guys. Was good at it, and went to a lineman challenge that I didn't play football, but they had me come do this lineman challenge. It's kind of like the NFL combine, and you could, there was like you had to squat for reps. You had to bench press for reps, and there was stuff like you had to throw a shot, and you had to do all these like, L-cone drills and stuff. And I went in there and just tore shit up. And I remember like all the other schools, like, who's this guy? He played, and they're like, he doesn't play football. He doesn't play football. And I wanted to play football. Dad wouldn't let me play football. Yep. I begged.
Yep.
And then Dad let you play football, and then you quit.
I quit.
Man, I'm
glad I quit.
Yeah, it's a great. I'm actually
I
looking
look
back
back
on
now.
it.
I'm like, oh man. Think of
Sure,
all the
I'm glad
head,
you didn't
head
run your
injuries
head
I
into
didn't
people.
get.
That's right. That's right.
That's right.
So yeah, same for me. So I got out of high school, and at the end of your high school years, I floundered around for a few years in college lifting. I would have said that I was bodybuilding. I never was interested in the actual sport of bodybuilding. That seemed ridiculous. And then the infamous day that I found the Dave Tate article on what is now T-Mag, T-Nation, that used to be called testosterone.net. And he wrote an article many years ago, 20 years ago, about how to bench press 600 pounds. And I discovered Westside Barbell, printed out hundreds of pages of articles from Dave Tate and Louis Simmons. And then we all went to Destin, Florida on a family vacation, and we read those articles on the beach and went to the Barnes & Noble in Destin in like 99, and bought our first 2 Powerlifting USAs.
Yep.
One of which had all the West Side crew on the cover, and we were in. And all of a sudden, we entered into that stage where it was powerlifting full bore for several years.
That was crazy. That was crazy times. I mean, I was about to get married when we really decided we were going to start competing, and I was 170 pounds, I think, at our first powerlifting competition in Tulsa.
Yep.
And I remember going into that competition, and it was just, I just felt silly. I mean, I was like around these other guys, and they were huge, and I was not. But I still, at 170 pounds, that competition, I deadlifted 500 pounds. And I was, which isn't bad for somebody who hasn't really done it very much. I think everything else was pretty terrible, but, my deadlift was decent. And 3 months later, after that competition, we competed at Eagle Gym in St. Louis.
Yep.
And I competed at 220.
Yeah.
From 170 to 220. And I took nothing.
Right.
I'm not kidding. There was no...
Literally we ate food. So much food. And it was terrible food. It was McDonald's.
And a lot of people are like, I've written articles every day.
That's right. It was massive amounts of McDonald's. It was pizza with oil poured on it. It was canola oil. Why we chose canola oil? What a terrible oil. So, which I think is made from corn husks or something.
Yeah.
So canola oil, we pour that in our protein shakes, like just to get calories, because all we cared about was getting strong.
Yeah.
And so, and we gained a ton of weight, and there were no performance enhancing drugs yet for me, especially. It was just food. It was just food and milk, and we were, you were 18 or 19 years old, and I was 20 or 21 years old, and we were like the perfect age. And that's the other thing, is like we had so much testosterone running through our veins naturally because we were the perfect age and doing the right stuff to be able to have that our bodies just grew. And I remember how fun it was. Those early years, we would go train at St. John's Fitness Center, right? It was a hospital. It was a hospital gym.
Yeah.
And we would add weight and add weight and add weight. And I mean, for years, we just added weight to the bar literally every workout. We talk about this, and I would love to know, I need to go back and see I have my old training logs. That'd be a really fun thing to like scan and publish at some point, like on Barbell Logic, my original training log. I mean, embarrassing, but you could just see that. And I kept all my PRs in the back, and so I can still go back and see what my 1 rep max PR squat is, my 3 rep, my 5 rep, my box squat. And we did West Side in those early days, right? It wasn't like novice linear progression stuff. It was just I mean, it was linear progression because we got heavier every single time.
Right.
But we did a big variation in exercises in those early days and just got strong and got big. I remember like it was yesterday, the first time I stepped on the scale and it said 200.
Yeah.
When I crossed the 200-pound barrier. I can remember the first time that I bench pressed 300 pounds, like it was yesterday. The first time I bench pressed 315. That same thing. The first time I deadlifted 500 was in that St. John's Fitness Center, deadlifting 500. And then you remember doing the old SLP powerlifting meet at St. John's Fitness Center, and it was just a bench press and deadlift meet.
Very clearly.
And I had performed. I had a car accident happen right in front of me the day before, and I had performed rescue breaths and CPR on a girl who died on me while I was performing CPR on her, and it was weird. It was in the moment it was surreal, and you're just going, and I had been trained in CPR and first aid. It was was coming home from renewing the license. That was what was also really strange. I went into that meet not thinking about powerlifting, not thinking about lifting, couldn't care less, couldn't get it out of my mind trying to save this girl's life and her dying on me. And for the first time ever, our family and our parents, who were not supportive in general of powerlifting, showed up to support us and cheer us on at this meet. And I had one of the best meets of my life. Now, this was in the early days. I was benching in a bench shirt. I benched 525 in a bench shirt. Old denim bench shirt, and I deadlifted conventional raw. It was my first 600-pound deadlift was there, and I can remember you didn't have to wear a singlet, and I was wearing like basketball shorts and a t-shirt, and I pulled 600 in basketball shorts and a t-shirt, and so that was a blast those days. We trained out at my old house in Republic, Missouri, in a little bedroom, and had started training with Dave Gulledge, who was far more athletically talented than us and showed up and he was bigger and stronger than us.
It's like the first great lesson for me on always making sure that the people that if you're doing something you want to improve on, making sure that you're doing that around surrounding yourself with people that are better than you. Like Dave, when Dave walked in, I was afraid. There were a lot of weights I was afraid of, right? And when Dave walked in and just obliterated those for, 10 reps or something, I was like, oh, okay. We put 100 pounds on every lift after Dave got there.
From training with Dave. There's no doubt. And he was a great training partner. He was always there, always on time, didn't call in sick.
He's a humble guy. Like never
super
never
humble.
bragged about what he's doing.
That's right. Quiet, was, happy to help if you asked for help. Was a couple years younger than me, he was about your age, right?
Yeah, just barely older than me. Yeah.
So between the two of us, and to put things into perspective, I would have said we were decently strong at the time. So I in my world, I think of us being equally as strong in those days. Maybe one of us were a little stronger than the other, doesn't matter. We were doing maybe we do a 2-board press, like a West Side 2-board press, where you put 2x4s or 2x6s on your chest. And we go up to, 315, 335 and do it for a triple. And then Dave would do it for 585 for a triple, raw, 565 for a triple. Seriously. We'd box squat 500 and be like, we are so strong, 500 box squat. And then he'd box squat 830 the same day, same workout. Yep. He'd just keep going up. He box squat 830 pounds on a box. Kids 20 years old. 19 years old, 20 years old, and you're just like, he's 300 pounds and not fat.
Yeah,
he went to school player. on a soccer scholarship.
He was just
fell in love
athletic.
with lifting and decided he wanted to lift rather than play soccer. Quit the soccer team at the college and just kept lifting.
Yeah.
And the guy was just crazy strong, super smart. By the way, very successful chiropractor now in Kansas City. He owns his little brother is the one that we've talked about on the podcast that deadlifted, talk about great genetics. His little brother conventional raw deadlifted 800 pounds the summer after his senior year of high school. He was 18 years old.
Crazy.
He did an 800-pound conventional deadlift in a meet. Crazy. So those days were awesome. They were fun. They were crazy. We were not risk averse at the time. We would load tons of weight on our back and eat ridiculous things and put shit in our bodies, but it was a blast. And so
I look back at that time, and I mean, it was a great way when you could think of the alternatives in college of what you could have been doing. I mean, we could have just been going to these terrible parties and
frat
just
parties and getting hammered,
doing recreational drugs and all kinds of stuff. Like, it's terrible. Instead, we were working out like crazy and getting strong. And even though when the company became an opportunity for me, I basically stopped almost cold turkey. And I've been doing I've been doing several powerlifting meets, and then my last meet was a strongman competition that I hadn't really done that much for, but I still took third in that one. Yep. And so, I mean,
Oklahoma's strongest man.
Yeah, not bad, not bad for like, it was a lot of fun, but I couldn't keep up. I knew I couldn't keep up with the training regimen if I was going to start a company. So, I had to stop, and then you kept going. I mean, you kept going.
I think it created a natural transition for me because we had powerlifted together. We had just started doing strongman together, but we're super green as far as strongman goes. And then your company started to take off, and you're like, okay, I can't train, can't do this anymore. And I went full bore on the strongman stuff and won my pro card the next year, and opened Strong Gym a year and a half after that. And it was kind of off to the races. And of course, I never thought that would be a career. I just thought it would be like this super intense habit, like passion that I like a hobby, a hobby, not a habit, that I had, but an intense one. And it's obviously it's worked out. So, and those were good days. By the way, Phil ended up coming in and training with us for a while.
Yeah.
Later in life, it was funny, and then we had caught up and then passed him. And actually to this day, Phil's got a really nice like rogue setup at his house, and he still goes in and he does all the basic stuff. But he's one of those guys who's like, nope, not really interested in ever squatting, or I want to bench. I never want to bench more than 225. I want to always be able to do 225 for 10. Like, that's kind of Phil, right? And squat and deadlift a little bit, but he's got a great setup, and he still does all the basic lifts. He doesn't care about it being. He's like, as long as I maintain my strength for the rest of my life, I'm fine.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I remember when I stopped powerlifting. So at that SLP meet that you talked about, that was at St. John's, I was 262. That was the heaviest that I ever got. After that meet, and we finished strongman. I think I competed strongman at 220, so I was kind of coming back down, and then I ended up about 220 whenever I stopped powerlifting, and I stayed there because I mean my habits were about eating and whatnot were sort of still in that zone, and then I kind of got tired of holding that weight, and I decided that I was going to run enormous distances. I was going to run marathon length distances, and I went from 220 back down to 170 from a period of, I think it was Thanksgiving, just before Thanksgiving, one particular year to Christmas of that year, I was down to 170, and I held 170 until.
Wait a minute, you couldn't have gone from 230 to 170 in 1 month.
It was 220, no, you're right. It wasn't. It was would have been Thanksgiving was the start, and I guess it would have been February, March probably by the time I ran that first long race.
See, Reynolds' exaggeration doesn't just stop with me.
No, we both have it. We both have it.
In 1 month, I lost 60 pounds.
And the furthest that I went, I did I was doing 18-mile runs. I remember I'd have Jenny drop me off in 2 cities away.
I was going to say that. I remember Jenny your wife would drive you out to like, that we have all these old trails, and they've converted like the old railroad tracks and stuff to trails, and she would drive you 18, 20 miles from town and drop you off, and you would just run home, and you're like, and how long did that take? You're like, like 5 hours.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I mean, there's one guaranteed way to make sure you don't quit, right? It's
that's right.
Drive my ass out 18 miles and I got to make it home. So
no, it's good. That's good. That's a fun stroll down memory lane. We need to do this a little more often. We've got little chunks of our life that'd be funny stories to tell that I think the listeners would enjoy. And so, hey, get out there and enjoy your kiddos today, for you dads. And for the rest of you, man, spend some good time with your dad. Give him a hug. Tell him how much you love him. We wish that we could do that. And I know there are a lot of you that are listening out there that can't do that anymore and wish you could. And so for those of you that still can, take the opportunity to tell your dad how much you love him. None of those dads, none of our dads were perfect. Some were better than others. Most did the best they could, and they deserve some love and affection today for that. And so try to see the good in your dad today, and if your dad, spend some time loving on your kids as well. And so you've been listening to a Principles podcast with Matt and Chris Reynolds here at Barbell Logic, and enjoy your Father's Day, the rest of your Father's Day. Again, if you don't have If you don't have training or you don't have a coach and you need one or your dad needs one, we've got a great sale running right now. If you check that out, our Father's Day sale is 50% off your first month of online coaching, plus you get a $50 gift card. So we say to the retailer of your choice, but our thought was, you could get a $50 gift card for dad at like Home Depot or Lowe's or something like that. So go to barbelllogic.com and you can check out online coaching and check that out. So fun show today. Glad we got to talk about that and a little stroll down memory lane. Dude, happy Father's Day to you. Hope you enjoy it with your kiddos.
You too, man.
All right, awesome. I will talk to you next week, and the rest of you, we will see you tomorrow morning. See ya.